All right, I wanted to go over a change to the programming system of RTS21. So, quick recap, RTS21 is a real-time strategy game where the player can develop their own artificial intelligence, basically orders that they give their units or their squads or their entire army. And so one of the things that I wanted with this was the ability that a user can create a function, basically a fully blown function system or programming system inside of the game. And those functions are going to naturally need to be a part of that. Now, I generated this as one of the initial ways to create functions. We've got a function editor. We can enter a name of the function, what return type. Here's a list of parameters of what we can pass in. We can edit the names. We can change the types. We can keep the changes, cancel the changes, or delete the parameter. We can save it, or we can just click X and cancel out of the whole thing. Okay, so that's straightforward when you already at least in my opinion, when you already understand programming, when you already understand what functions do and what the different parts of it mean. But for someone who's just a player, someone who has no programming experience whatsoever, comes in and sees this. Greg on our team suggested that this is going to be overwhelming for the average user, and as soon as he said it, I had to agree. I added this to the showcase internally, and that was one of the first responses to it, and it makes sense to me. I remember a long time ago when I switched over from QBasic to Visual Basic 3, like a long time ago. That was the first point that I ever had real functions. Like in QBasic, we had the concept of subroutines, but not exactly functions. Anyway, I remember seeing a UI almost exactly the same as this for creating functions in it. And I remember it being confusing to me at the time too. I didn't really understand what the different parts were for. I didn't know what I could do with it. It wasn't intuitive. So one of the things that we're facing as an issue, like the initial sample AI, is patrolling from 2 points. Telling a unit to patrol from point A to point B, just go back and forth between them over and over again. How those points are decided, that's a separate issue, but one AI to get assigned to a unit or a squad to just say go to this point and then go to that point and repeat. The general way that I had for that, let's go over to here, and we see that we have this patrol function. So over here we have patrol, and then in it we have a start position and an end position. And then inside of it, we loop forever. The first step of the loop is to go to the starting position. The second part of the loop is to go to the ending position. Now that makes sense. That's a general patrol function. But of course, in this case, the variables are hard-coded. That was one of my key differences. In my original sample, we had different parameters that we're passing in before the function is even generated. That's normal. That's how we normally program. But in this case, when a user isn't going to understand that, I figured it would probably be simpler if we just had something where we physically set the starting location and the end location. We set what those are. Whether or not they'll understand what these variables are, how to get them, that's a different issue. But anyway, we get those positions. Now, let me go ahead and grab this. And let's ink pad that. Okay, so this is the function overall, and initially we have our patrol function. So we're calling into it and we're saying start the position. So normally if we had this, we might also list off on here that there was a start parameter that was a vector 3. And then we also have another parameter which is an end position, which is also a vector 3. Horrible handwriting. Anyway, so I've got those two locations, and this was what I was initially suggesting, that we would have to enter these things in. What I'm suggesting now is that we do away with all of that. Get rid of this stuff. And then we just say, well, give us a function name, patrol. And inside of that, then just create a variable called starting position and a variable called ending position. Give them default values. From that point, we continue down the code and we say, okay, well, loop forever, go to the starting position and then go to the ending position, and then loop back over and over and over again. So that keeps repeating over and over in this. And with this, how do we actually set these positions becomes a serious question. Well, there's a couple things. Like, let's say we have this function to set a unit to start patrolling something. Well, one, we are also going to need to know the unit, and we'll be passing that around in a similar fashion. But let's say that we have our order. We have our order, and inside of our order, when someone calls the order to patrol, we're going to tell it that we already have a start variable, and we already have an end variable. So we don't just pass these as parameters to patrol. Instead, what we're doing is we're calling the patrol function. So, oh my God. Wow. So that moved the pen and the background at the same time. Okay, so let's say we start by calling the patrol function. What I'm suggesting is that over here on this start position variable, for both the set, whatever the setter and constructor is for this, that we effectively have something like a checkbox that says, is this something that can be set from outside the function? Is this something that needs to be set from outside the function? So two different options there, possibly a drop down or something like that. But effectively just stating whether or not this comes from outside. We've created the variable inside of here, and by virtue of creating it with this property set, we're declaring that when we call patrol, we now have to pass in what that start function is. That when we call patrol, it's now going to ask for start. And it's also going to ask for end. So we're still being able to pass in parameters, but we didn't have to program the function for it in the first place. Now we're going to come to another state where we're going to need to know information from the user. Like, how do we create this AI command, this order, but we don't know what those locations are. Now, in one condition, you might consider that the AI will intelligently determine where to patrol. And it might do things like look at the location of the map and then do some funky math or whatever to figure out where is the perimeter of their base, and then send units to start walking that perimeter. If it does a complete circle, then so be it. It'll just do a complete circle. If it doesn't do a complete circle, doesn't come end to end, then the unit will go to one side, then the other, back and forth, back and forth. We could have an AI, we could have commands that start to figure this out. Or we could ask the user. So when the user clicks the patrol order associated with either a unit or a squad, we might have coding commands inside of this called, let's see, create buttons, or create button. And this create button would have a function or a variable called like a value that's being passed in called cancel, and then we might have another button called delete or cancel done. Okay, cancel and done. Those are two things. In this case, we'll just say cancel. We add a button called cancel, and then what code is it effectively going to call? Just like how this code calls on all the next steps. But when they click cancel, what does that do? And that might set a different AI. That might just tell it to exit this AI. We might have a command in there called exit AI. Don't know. But anyway, so the user creates a button, and the button will show up on the screen somewhere. It just automatically sets it for order button whenever orders get fired. The next one we might say is ask for position. Ask for position. And in that we say click on the map this is naturally this would be an entirely different thing, but click on the map where you click where the next patrol point should go, or click where the first patrol point should go, and then it asks for that again. Click where the next patrol point should go. So if we pass into it the position, and we also pass in what variable we're expecting to set. So that will automatically return, and we just would say, okay, well, we're passing in our start to this first call, and that comes back out to over here. So with this one, we've effectively just asked the user to set these. And then once we've done that, and we've completed this, we're going to go over to this step where we say patrol. We finally call the patrol function. We've set the variables for start and end. We called the patrol function. That calls this loop. And after the patrol function is done, or even before, we might put in a delete button to delete the cancel button. And that's the entire process. So we've created a simple, what I think is a relatively simple way to put in user interface, new tools inside of the game for users to players to use when they're developing their orders. That they can ask for a location, they can ask for particular units. They could say select units first, create squad. And from that squad, it's got a list of units. Please select the drones. Please select the tanks. Please select whatever. And it might have text that says, we're expecting 3 tanks and 2 drones in this squad, a minimum of. Add that many or more. And then you select which ones you want. Or maybe an additional button that just says, well, create one for me. And then that would include commands to go find your base, give it the command to create a new drone and send it off to you. Anyway, so that's the concept of how I'm planning on this programming system to work. And hopefully I presented it well enough that you might have been able to follow along with this rambling in my head. And what I'd like to do, what I'd like to hear about are insights as to, are there other areas that I can potentially simplify down? Is it still overly complicated? Like, I want the programmers to be able to develop AI. I want it to be simple, but not too simple. Like Final Fantasy, let's see over here. Move that for a second. Final Fantasy. We had a document in here. Nope, not those ones. I lost that one. Oh, here we go. Got it. Okay, so on this one we see like the Final Fantasy Gambit system, where it basically is a list of all these different possibilities. Now this one is a little too simple. There is potential to create a patrol system with this capability, where effectively this one is just going down the list, and the first one where the state is accurate, it will call this. And then, as far as I'm aware, once it does that, it just stops and doesn't call anymore. But then, if the first one comes back false, that's not true, and this one's not true, and this one's not true, it'll go on until it finds one that is. That, say, the foe is, and there's a foe that is fire weak. So on that foe, they're going to call Firaga. And I don't know, I'm probably butchering it, but whatever. The point is that this one is really kind of a single step, single event where you just create a list. Whereas the AI and the patrol system, while it would be, I did think of a way that we could put it in there, might become overly complicated inside of it without having a way to see how these positions and items are related to each other. So in this case, we have the draggable UI that's going to look more like, let's go back, and this one. So on this one, we see these different steps in here. Can I zoom in? Let's just zoom in. Oh, that's kind of a horrible zoom in. But anyway, you see these different ones where we have the different types of statements here that they would ultimately line up with each other. This is probably a better visual. When something is clicked, then do this, and you can see that we can add more steps to it. So we would effectively be adding all these steps, setting the variables, creating the variables, asking the user for information as parts of these. And one step, we would also have functions that we can call. Anyway, I'd love to hear feedback and ideas of what to do with this. suggestions of how it could be improved even more, maybe simplified. Maybe there's some complex areas that I'm not really imagining where going down this route might shoot myself in the foot. I'd love to get your feedback. If anyone has any ideas to submit, please just bring them up. All right, thank you.